If Jerry will come
Jim,
on.
were you just down at Main Street?
Jerry.
I'm going to go ahead and call our meeting to order. It's about 3 minutes after. And I guess first thing is take roll.
Yeah. All right. So, Jerry Herman,
I'm here.
Doug DeHart, not here. Bob Roth,
Present.
Brian Boyce,
Present.
Richard Craven,
Present.
Eric Carr, not here. Shaw Spady.
There.
I'm Pete Walter, the staff liaison.
John Lewis.
John Lewis, Public Works Director. Laura Turway, Associate Planner. And in the audience, we have a member of the public.
Yes, we do.
And that member is?
I don't know.
Jim
Let him
Messina.
announce himself.
Hey, Jim, do you want to introduce yourself?
James Nisita.
James Nisita. All right.
Okay.
And let's see. So we have time for any citizen comments for items not on the agenda. And then hearing none, we'll go ahead and go into the sign code update.
So I'll just introduce Laura. Laura is project manager for the sign code update, and she's here to give us a brief presentation, talk about it, and get your feedback at this point.
Good evening. All right, I see a lot of familiar faces around here. So you may have heard my spiel once or twice. I hope you hear it once or twice more, and I can get your comments. I'm here to talk about signage, both on private property and public property, like the sign you saw outside today when you walked in that said City Hall, or signs businesses post on their walls, or banners or flags or any type of signage like that. We know that signage helps shape how you feel about a community. You could think of Las Vegas or Times Square, or even if you drive down 99 through Gladstone, you can start to get a sense of community, and signage is one piece of that pie. On the flip side, you can think of Leavenworth, Washington, or Sisters, Oregon, where they have a lot different sign codes. So it was one of the City Commission's top goals for 2013 to look at our sign code and see if it's representative of what we would like to see in Oregon City. And so we started this project maybe a month ago or so, and we are just beginning a large public involvement campaign to sort of put our thumb out and see, is our sign code right or wrong? Is it too restrictive, not restrictive enough? Is it really what we want to see? And so at this point, I am trying to get as many comments as I can on what you would like to see for signage in Oregon City. So I am before every committee that will accept me. I thank you very much for letting me attend your meeting. So it does have to do with natural resources, but really I just wanted to get in front of as many faces as I can. And when we're talking about signage, there's one legal thing that I guess we have to mention, is that we're talking about the number of signs, the size of signs, the material of signs. We're not talking about the content of a sign. So we're content neutral in the state of Oregon, so it doesn't matter what the sign says, just how many we allow. And you'll start to think about signage after you've heard this presentation, and maybe you'll drive up and down the street or walk up and down the street and notice more and more signs and think about what you would and would not like to see in Oregon City. Right now, we're not actively enforcing our sign code, so we want to figure out where we are today. Is that okay? Do you like the signs out there right now? Are they okay? If you're a business owner, can you advertise appropriately given our requirements? Sort of where they fall on that spectrum. We are working with the consultant, Enviro Issues, and then they also have a sub-consultant, Herbsworks, to help us navigate through this process. We are putting together a citizen advisory team, and applications are due on Friday at midnight, so please apply if you'd like to. the mayor is going to appoint people for specific positions. It was very important to us that we had an even-handed group and committee, since they're going to advise staff on the sign code. So we have certain positions like the sign companies, neighborhood representatives, city residents, things like that. And we will be appointing people next week. They'll be announced at the City Commission meeting next Wednesday. But for now, we want to figure out if we're appointing a team to come up with a group of signage, a package, if you will, that is representative of Oregon City. How are the rest of the citizens of Oregon City thinking about signage? So we have a website, which is ocsigncode.org. It's up on your screen. You can go to this website and post any of your thoughts on signage. You can send me emails. You can look at all of our meetings. We just want to get as much input about as many types of signs as possible. You may want to think about lighting of signage. For lighting pollution, just anything you could think of about what type of signs you would or would not like to see in Oregon City. Again, staying content neutral. We want to hear what your input is, and then we're going to give that input to the advisory team so that they could sort of see what themes we're picking up. We've gone to all the neighborhood associations, or most of them, and we're asking them if there's anything specific for their neighborhood association, any specific guidelines. So maybe we would allow A-frame signs in the right-of-way, like downtown, but not on the hilltop, or are there any location-specific sign requirements that we'd like to see? So I am here to get your input, and if you, whatever you tell me, I will write it down, and we will pass it along for what you do or do not like for signage in Oregon City. So,
what's the Oregon City's kind of position regarding the kind of electronic signs or like TV screens and change or have all kinds of distracting graphics, or kind of look at the impact of that with like driver safety?
yeah, that's a
distraction?
great question. We do not allow any flashing, rotating, revolving signs in Oregon City. So we haven't done any sign code updates for over 20 years, but that was one of the last ones that we did make. We haven't done any significant ones in over 20 years, but one of the last ones we did make was to not allow that kind of thing. So it was pretty nice. We're not really having to deal with people who want to do those TV type signage right now, since it's not allowed. But that is something, I mean, we're looking at if our sign code is really off base now, we would completely replace it. It just depends what the people of Oregon City businesses want for signage. So right now we don't allow that for that reason, for safety.
One of the ancient history things is that Oregon City is one of the few places that has large billboards along the freeways. There was something that they had to do decades ago that didn't get done, and so I think they're sort of grandfathered in. But is there any talk about dealing with that issue at all?
Yes, we are going to, I suspect we will talk about billboards. We did a sign code update in 1994, was the last major one. And when we did that, we said that billboards were no longer allowed. And we said that you can have billboards for 10 more years. And after 10 more years, they all have to come down. So you would gain back the money that you put into the price of the billboard or whatnot. And we never actually enforced that in 2004.
So they're all still up.
They're all still up. There is a
Yeah.
separate legal piece when they're adjacent to the freeway.
Mm-hmm.
There's some Freeway Act. So our lawyers are working with us on this project to tell us sort of where those legal boundaries are and aren't. But those might be treated slightly different. So right now, I mean, up on 7th, you'll see a couple. So technically, they are not allowed. And so that's one thing we're going to want to look at too, is if there is a sign that is allowed, and then we say it's not allowed, can that stay forever, or are we going to go through this type of program again where in so many years you have to take it down, and then the other piece is actually enforcing that program too. After we go through the sign code update, we're going to work actively on enforcement of our sign code. We want to make sure that we have a sustainable enforcement program, so that we dedicate a certain number of hours or certain routes or something like that, that there is some dedication to actually making sure that the sign code is enforced and that it's enforced for many years to come. That it's just not, we're working on this project now, we'll look at it real good right now, but that it's sort of lasts throughout the years.
Is a sign, I'm sitting here thinking about the Catholic Church that has a big mural of John McLaughlin and so forth. Is that a sign or is that something else? Like what?
See, these are all great questions. It would be under our definition of signs, since we're content neutral, murals are signs.
Really?
So we would have to think about that. You know, would we allow, right now you come in and get sign permits over the counter, very quick, very easy. You know, if you want certain really big signs, would they go to like an arts commission for approval or something like that? But we can't really look at content, how our code is right now. So it is an interesting question we'll have to breach.
So
is there a
because of
sep-
your answer, are present murals in the downtown already regulated but not enforced?
So you get, for wall signs, you get twice the length of the total wall for signage. So if your wall is 100 feet long, you get 200 square feet of signage on that size of the wall. So it depends on the size of the wall. So it depends how much square footage you have and how big that mural is. But that is our sign code as it stands right now, yes.
It seems to me that murals are good, you know? I mean,
Right.
that's me, but, so.
Sure.
So would you like me to write something down about that? I am here to
I'm writing
get
it down,
your
Laura.
direction. You're writing it down? You want me to, we
Whatever
can all write
comments
it?
and questions.
I mean, anything historically oriented
Well,
seems
you know, as long as it's not
significant.
advertising Tide or something, you know.
That's a hard, staying content neutral is so hard.
Well, yeah, but, you know, if it's serving an advertising function, that's one thing, but if it's history, which most of them are, or, you know, local scenery or whatever, it's like projecting on the elevator, you know, is that a sign?
I know.
And how is
so-
the content different from a mural?
So
I
I'm
heard
gonna,
that. I heard that is a sign. And Tony, I remember
Really?
was questioning that a little bit. I think he just decided to let it lie, but that was an
Yeah.
interesting interpretation, I thought.
Well, you know, if you had a mural of the same subject matter as the elevator is going to show, should the law be any different? That's my question. And I would support something for genuine art, you know, as a different category that may not have the same rules.
I've got kind of a background question. When you have ordinances or whatever on the books, how does the city formally say, this is the law, we're just not going to enforce it? I mean, what kind of I'm just trying to say, I can imagine the police department saying, well, we don't want people to smoke pot, but we're just not going to enforce, you know, marijuana possession law. How does that work?
so as far as us not enforcing it right now.
Yeah. I mean, if somebody made a complaint,
So what?
would you have to if it's on the books?
So what happens now is we take in all the complaints and we put them on a list or we log them, and then when we have enough funding to support that staff-wise, then we'll get there. And after this project, we will get there because we want to sort of,
So you work on the backlog?
no, not right now. We
Oh,
don't have enough
but I
funding.
mean, if you get the funding, do you go back
Yep.
to the old complaints?
Exactly. Well, I suspect that out of this process, we will want to go around the city and make sure that everything complies. And then from that, do upkeep every week or month or something like that.
You know, I'd encourage the city to consider, you know, when you have the thing about people parking in disabled parking spots, a lot of jurisdictions don't just rely upon paid staff for enforcement. They have trained volunteers to go ahead and help jurisdictions enforce.
Would you like me to write that down? Train
Yeah,
volunteers
yeah,
for
I mean,
enforcement?
I mean, maybe if you have such a backlog, you'd want some signs to maybe be dealt with before the complainer dies or something.
It's difficult to figure out if they got permits since our systems weren't all electronic, and it's
Permits
difficult.
for what now?
For signs, if signs are unpermitted or not, or going through and dealing with how much time do you have to remove the sign. It's very time consuming.
Did you say something about disabled?
Well, yeah,
I
and
didn't quite get the connection.
Well, basically, some jurisdictions don't have the paid resources to hire people to go after everybody who's not entitled to park in a disabled parking spot. So you have trained volunteers who've been, like, since deputized, who go out and cite individuals who aren't permitted to park in disabled parking spots in order to leave those vacant for the people that really need them. And I'm just saying that if the city's short of resources for some of the sign enforcement, maybe that's an option that could be investigated to leverage what you have.
It's a great idea.
So do you have any overlying regulations involving lighting, like down lighting, night sky friendly lighting, that sort of thing that's associated with all signage?
The only thing we have in our sign code regarding lighting is that signs for conditional uses in residential zones, like your schools in residential zone, your churches, they can't have an internally lit sign. They have to have, if they're lighted, they have to have one that's sort of like on the ground, lighting them. It's not internally.
The wrong
but
direction.
That's the. It's the wrong direction, but
Yeah.
they can't be internally lighting out. In our commercial development standards, we do have luminosity standards for at property lines. You can't be more than half a foot candle.
I'd like to suggest that one of the main things you put for signage throughout the city is that it meets sort of like dark sky friendly lighting and safety, which would mean it would be downlit, not uplit, that sort of thing. And that signs be reviewed with that as a criteria.
That's a great suggestion.
That our earlier discussion here brought up the, what is the plans to have funding to enforce these new rules? Has any thought been put into that at this point?
We've had suggestions that we regulate signs in the right-of-way, which we currently don't do, like those A-frames in the sidewalks downtown. If we do that, there's been suggestions that we require permits for every so often or something like that, and then that permit would have a fee associated with it, and so we could generate revenue that way, but then also we take our existing fees that we get for signs and just use that more to enforce the sign. The sort of sign enforcement's gone back and forth between planning and code enforcement, and we're both short-staffed, and I know everyone is sick of hearing that. So we would figure out a permanent home for enforcement of our sign code.
Are the A-frame signs on the main street that he's talking about, are those a problem or an issue, or?
We don't have standards for them, and we don't specifically allow them. Our sign code is silent on signs in the right-of-way, and so we've heard comments that it would be good to get standards for how many you can have, make sure you have space so you can meet ADA requirements to walk on the sidewalk next to it, that kind of thing. So I'm suspecting that will happen out of this process. That's one of the few parts where we don't have any code for it, and we have a need for some sign regulations regarding that.
So that suggests that there is a problem then. I mean, I'm not downtown all the time, so I'm
Right.
not sure what the problem is, but to me, somebody's advertising a business or something like that, and I appreciate seeing the signs out there, because it'll draw me in typically.
Do you want me to write that down, that you're supportive of A-frame signs?
Yeah,
We've heard
or
comments
some
both
kind
ways.
of, advertisement, people are gonna have to advertise somehow, and, it just seems like, if it's not overwhelming, that's a good thing, it seems to me. Personally.
It's good.
On the other hand, there needs to be enough space between like the A-frame sign, assuming that it's perpendicular from the wall, to like have a wheelchair and like an individual
Yeah.
between the parking meter and the A-frame, because
And all the trees.
and the trees too.
Yeah.
So it's kind of
Cut it down.
maybe a size thing on the A-frame sign. So figure how much room a wheelchair needs, and somebody else or one or two people walking the other way, because it's all going to converge at the same spot.
One of the things that I've been preaching, and we don't have code for it, but I would like to see it in this sign code, is that business owners respect the pedestrian way, so that if you're in a wheelchair or sight impaired, if you look at Main Street right now, they're doing a pretty good job of self-regulating, where there's a clear 4-foot wide strip where you as a pedestrian can walk from one end of Main Street to the other. Now every once in a while you'll see a table encroach into that ped zone, and our preference is to either keep it uptight against the wall where there's room for that, or that they move it out into the furnishing zone, which is where the trees are, the street lights, and mailboxes, newspaper boxes, those kind of things.
Yeah.
So I hope too that if we have a sign code that we can address kind of respecting the ped zone.
Gary, you had a comment on signs
Yes.
and trees earlier.
Right, thank you for helping me. My comments really have to do with education and interpretation, signage for natural resource issues. And this is something that I experienced some time ago at our River Resource Museum site. There's some, we had opportunities to put up some large black signs that said owl habitat or raptor habitat, this nest site, that nest site. And we did that. And they're quite high up in the trees, but they're big enough to be seen by the human eye, your eyes, not mine. Okay, and they've been really effective in drawing people's attention to things. And so my question to Laura was, how does this fit in? So I just wrote basically a preamble here for my concerns. Opportunities exist to present information, education to citizens that will encourage preservation and enhancement of fish and wildlife habitats in the natural and built environment. Now, therefore, it's kind of written like a preamble. You can think about this, but now, therefore, Oregon City Sign Code shall, and I suggested some things here, encourage quality presentation of fish and wildlife and natural resources information. Encourage placement of such things, features by agencies, service organizations, and private landowners. She was telling me about what the stipulations are present on who can place signs. Seek site-sensitive solutions that achieve the education and interpretation efforts. Minimize loss of such opportunities through staff and proposer cooperative efforts. And the reason I did this, I want to leave it really open, because case in point, we have signs on trees, do we not, that identify these trees as heritage trees. How do those fit in?
Signs, well, I can
Those-
tell you what our code is now, but it's whatever you want it to be in the future.
Sure.
Yeah, I want to point out those signs for the heritage trees are on freestanding stakes, not attached to the tree.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, and plus
But are they allowed?
They're
That's the
small, they're less than a square foot in size, so those things aren't regulated.
Okay.
Signs
Yeah.
owned and operated by government agencies are not subject to the sign code.
That's today,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm not raising a red flag.
I know.
I'm raising a flag of, can we accommodate an attitude where we would encourage this to be done properly? Because I think there are a lot of places where it would work well. And the reason I say this is that you put interpretive signs down in people's harm's way. Any place hands are is Harmville. And I've watched all sorts of interpretive signage things over the time that I've been doing this stuff, which is a long time, get modified, destroyed, altered, and if there's some flexibility thought into this, put into this process, then I think it could encourage some really innovative things that haven't been done before. And I'd like to actually at our next meeting bring an example of, I won't bring all 14 of them, but 14 signs that Boy Scouts did. I can place these legally on my site because it's Gladstone, but the idea seems relevant to maybe be used in Oregon City. They're beautifully made, fabricated. I haven't done it. But so I'm going to leave this here for you to take, and I'll bring it over to you.
Yeah, I have a couple of sheets in front of you. One is a feedback form. If you want to fill it out, you can give it to myself or to Pete. On the back is just a brief summary of what our sign code does and doesn't allow. And again, if you want to change any of this, let us know. If you feel comfortable with these regulations, let us know that too. There's also a second sheet of paper, which is a brief summary of our project and our process moving forward. As I stated before, we're going to collect all this data, give it to our CAT team or our citizen advisory team. They're going to have 4 meetings in which they come up with a sign code recommendation to staff. Staff will write sign code amendments using the advisory body's advice. And then in January or so, we're going to submit a legislative application that'll go before Planning Commission and City Commission. So there'll be a whole slew of public hearings and lots of opportunities to participate either online or at those public hearings as well. And then we're shooting for adoption sometime June or July next summer.
Next July?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, for those of us that, like myself, that haven't really noticed any problems with signs, now I'm going to go out looking.
You're welcome.
Oh, yeah, maybe that is,
Yeah.
you know, because it really has just gone right past me, you know, in terms of signage, basically.
It must not be working then.
So, do you want to think about it? Give me your comments
Yeah.
either in writing or with phone or on our on website as well.
Hey, Laura, can you make sure that, I mean, we've got streetlight banners and cross-street banners, and I want to make sure there's provisions for both of those. They're not necessarily cities, but they community event.
Do people pay when they put those banners up across the street or anything?
Yes.
You should pay more. Oh.
Yeah, I was wanting to repeat something I said earlier at another meeting. Is there's real different needs for commercial signage in different parts of the city. Like you go to a shopping center and you can,
Right.
from hundreds of feet away, you can see the front of the store, so they like to put up big signs there. And then you go downtown and it's just the opposite. You can only see down the street and not very well there. And by the time you can't get away from the buildings far enough to want a big overhead sign like that. So they need blade signs instead, or sandwich signs. And it's just a completely different need for those businesses. And I think that needs to be addressed in any code in the future.
Yep.
You know, in thinking of a kind of a climate change, energy conservation thing, if a business is closed, you want to give some thought to maybe turning off any kind of electrical lighting of the sign. You know, you can't go to the business and they can't receive you as a business. Maybe we don't want to have the lights on all night long if people can't make use of the services. Maybe the lights should be on when the business is available to serve. And that would save on energy conservation, to address some of the lighting concerns, reduce climate change, save the world.
Any other comments? I don't want to take too much of your time. I want to be respectful of your agenda. And
Well, I think one thing that Jerry was saying on interpretive signage, I don't see that on your list, I guess, or is it?
yeah.
Did I miss it somewhere?
I did opportunities for
Oh,
educational
education,
signage,
okay.
but should I
Yeah,
add to that? Is
okay.
that okay?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, all right. If there's
Thank you.
no other comments, thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. And let me know if you have any other questions. Thank you.
Mine is 2 pages, not stapled, just thought I'd tell you. So. Okay.
Okay. Okay, let's move on to the looking at the final draft of the Heritage Tree Code.
Let's see, where do we,
You can,
back to the,
yeah, I think that'll do it. So, Pete, did you have a
Yeah.
presentation on this?
1 second, I'll turn this projector screen off for the time being.
Just don't turn off my.
Yeah, I'm just gonna put the screen, take the screen off, so.
Wow. I didn't know you could do that.
You can do that. Just have to get the blue screen. So. Oh, well. Okay, so on to item 4A, which is our final draft of the Heritage Tree Code, Oregon City Municipal Code, Chapter 12.08, subsection 040. And this code that's been revised was, I emailed you a Word version of this to show all of the track changes, which is a pretty lengthy document, but I wasn't able to, you can't show a Word version on this computer system, so unfortunately, if people in the audience or anybody else wants to see that, you know, we have that Word version for review. So what you have before you is a clean version, which has been reviewed by the city attorney, and that version has not changed at all since we sent it to you last. There were no concerns on the city attorney's part with respect to what was written, and specifically what we had asked the city attorney to look at were some of the newest sections which we added. So we had added a review process which includes completeness review by staff. We'd also had clarifications on the timing of the application and how quickly that application would be forwarded to the Natural Resources Committee for review and recommendation. And so there's a similar timeline in there for the City Commission. So basically, those are the new sections. They are they're meant to expedite review for the applicant and for the NRC and the City Commission. It's similar to a 120-day land use process. The other parts that were added were the differentiation between the processes based on whether that tree that was nominated was on a city-owned property, a right-of-way that was under city jurisdiction, or a public property that was not a city jurisdiction. And what we attempted to do was provide clarification there. Basically, the question that came up was if a tree is nominated in a right-of-way or public property that is not city, but might be Clackamas County or Oregon Department of Transportation or some other jurisdiction, the city attorney did not see any problem with just notifying that agency of the nomination and then requiring their consent before the application could move forward. Now, their consent could take the number of forms, hypothetically. The consent could be, yeah, we agree, contingent on some sort of a maintenance agreement for this tree, and some any other conditions, hypothetically, that agency could attach to the nomination before they consent to it. But that would be, without getting into too much detail and trying to anticipate what those might be, we just said written consent at some point. So that's kind of where that's at right now. And that's for stuff that's not city jurisdiction. If the public property is a city jurisdiction, then it goes straight to the NRC, and then to the City Commission. Well, and then if there's an abutting property owner who is by code responsible for the maintenance of that tree, say if it's in an alleyway or some other right-of-way where the tree is in existence, then that property owner has to be notified. But the property owner doesn't have to give his consent to the nomination because it's on city right-of-way. Ultimately, that's going to play out during the review process, I think, because those persons who would come forward and say whether they support or don't support the nomination. And then this is a discretionary decision, ultimately, because it's going to go up to the City Commission and be voted on, and all of the items will be on the record at that point. So that's kind of our process as it stands with the revisions. There's some cleanup to be done in terms of some numbering and that sort of thing, but the actual text of this is pretty much set, unless you have any other comments about it. From this point, we would take this up through the Planning Commission and City Commission if the Natural Resources Committee approves it tonight. I should have mentioned also that going back a couple of meetings, we had established the criteria for the nomination. So we have two sets of criteria. One set is the site criteria, and the other set is the actual heritage criteria. And So I'll briefly go back over what those are. So under the criteria for designation in Section D, the heritage criteria include 4 criteria, one of which must be met. And then under the site criteria, we're saying that the site and condition criteria, all of those criteria must be met, but those criteria no longer include a provision that was in there previously with respect to a pending land use application, pending or approved land use application. They include sufficient documentation by a certified person that the tree is not irreparably damaged, diseased, hazardous, or unsafe, or if it is, that the applicant is willing to have the tree or standard trees treated by an arborist or someone who can take care of those issues. And the tree cannot be listed as invasive on any local or regional plant list, and that the property owner, or if a street tree, the budding property owner, consents to the designation and agrees to sign the protective covenant that would be recorded to protect the tree in perpetuity. And then the follow-up administrative side of this, which is not codified but which implements a lot of this, is a restrictive covenant or deed restriction, which the city attorney has drafted. And it basically includes the legal description of the property, the terms of the covenant, and the conditions under which the tree has to be reviewed before it can be removed, if it's going to be removed, the penalty for removal, and all those sorts of things that are in the covenant. So that's legal stuff that doesn't really need to be in the code. Yeah. So that's kind of where that's at, and would be happy to try to answer any questions you have about it.
Yeah. Did I get my last amendments into you?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we did. We got into the eligibility of certain species of trees. I believe we added those comments in. And we also had some comments that you had sent us with respect to the definitions. So I think the last comment included a tree eligibility, including Pacific dogwood at 5 inches.
That was an early one.
That was an early one.
Yeah, there was from the last the one you sent out with all the comments. I commented on that, and I thought I had sent it to you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we got all those in.
Okay. Yeah, there's one here that I'm seeing that. When you say on any local or regional plant list, I think it should be more limited than that. Either specify a specific major one or say any list adopted by local government, something like that, because I've seen some lesser lists that actually had errors, like including native plants as invasives. Okay. And if there's some oddball list out there that includes the wrong trees, we don't want to use them. And there's nothing here about that.
Okay. So how would you suggest we change that?
I would say something like on any agency-approved plant list, invasive plant list. That would, assuming that nobody accepts one that has mistakes in it like that. I haven't actually seen that on trees, but I have on other plants.
Okay. All right.
And there's also confusion between invasive from a natural area standpoint and invasive as in gardens and cultivated areas, and that some natives are invasive in gardens.
And what would you like to do about those, Mr. Chairman?
Well, like I just said, it's just make sure we use reputable adopted lists rather than any list. I think that would do it.
List.
Okay.
Okay. Is the rest of the committee in agreement with that? Okay.
Okay.
I think we have some public comment on this.
Yeah, I have Jim Nocita has put in a card on comment on this.
Hi, once again, James Nacita, Oregon City. Thanks to everybody for this long haul. Pete, you've been really great
Sure.
at putting up with all of us and making fine contributions to the evolution of this document. Looking over this, it's really nice to see it. I do, in looking over it, have 2 comments on it. And I want to direct everybody's attention to section C, review process, subsection 4, following approval by the City Commission. And I'm wondering if in subsection B there, something just there was an oversight, or whether it hadn't been discussed yet. Because in this designation process, I don't see anything that applies to something that's solely on city-owned property. Let's say, I think in an earlier meeting I had used the example of Atkinson Park. If, we decided that the forests in Atkinson Park, wholly owned by the city of Oregon City, but not within any right-of-way. I don't see here where what formality gives that designation to those trees in Atkinson Park if we were to do that.
Okay.
And I think simply it would be to add in subsection 4B, if the tree or stand of trees is located on public property or on city property or within the public right-of-way.
How does that relate to, I guess it'd be up the screen a ways, under 2, Natural Resource Committee Review and Recommendation, subsection B, if the nominated tree or stand is located on public right-of-way or property under city jurisdiction. Does that include what you're talking about, or?
I think the question is related to the finalization of the designation.
Yeah, but I think Commissioner Craven raises a good point, because I don't think that addressing a nomination solely on city-owned property is addressed in Section 2 either.
Way back on page 1 and 2, there is referral to a city-owned property and not right-of-way. So if the tree or trees are located on city property that is not public right-of-way, such as parks and other property, the nomination shall be handled in a certain way. But I imagine that it ought to include that in the section you're referring to, saying that, let me go back to it, something similar.
Under 2A, is that where you're?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that one right
Page
there.
1, on page 1 of 8.
Yeah, going on to page 2 of 8. I get back to the. Oops, went past it.
What's the suggestion? I think we can certainly add the suggestion to 4B, if you're in agreement with that. The addition of 4B.
Makes sense since it's already
Yeah,
in the rest
yeah,
of the
just for
document.
consistency's sake, that.
Yeah, I'm looking at this. I think what might be going on through the evolution of the document is we had that fairly lengthy discussion about whether we needed to break out city right-of-way from other forms of right-of-way, and we came up with that 3: city property, city right-of-way, and other forms of right-of-way. Maybe we need to review the rest of the document to make sure all of that's consistent going through the rest of the sections as well.
Yeah, consistency is always good.
Because I think Commissioner Craven's point is well taken, that in Section 2, that might be an issue as well. Let's see about City 3.
Oh, yeah, there was another,
Yeah, I don't think it really matters to Section 3.
yeah, okay.
Oh, wait a minute.
Okay.
So is the idea that we would basically have a subheading for each section depending on location?
Yeah, we have.
Like 2A, 2B, and 2C, and then try to keep it fairly short, but follow that format? Or just add a few extra words here and there? Yeah,
As long as it covers all the possible
yeah,
ways this could play out, whether it's on city right-of-way, city park, city buildings, so on.
okay.
I think, for consistency, if you're going from one section to the next, then you would expect to kind of see the same sort of format, I guess,
Yeah.
and the same things.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you're
Mm-hmm.
left wondering, maybe,
Sure.
if it's ambiguous. So
Yeah.
maybe it should follow the same format anyway.
Okay. We'll try and make that less ambiguous.
Okay.
And the same issue goes to Section D, B3, because it's on site and condition criteria 1 to 3 must all be satisfied. If the stand or tree is on public property only, like again Atkinson Park, I'm not sure number 3 is applicable, and that should be a requirement. If the property owner or if a street tree abutting property owner consents to the designation and agrees to sign the protective covenant. If it's just city property, I'm not sure it's applicable. But this section is making it applicable to a situation to which it really doesn't apply logically.
I'm sorry, I got lost. You're in section 3 or
D,
E,
3?
oh, I'm sorry, D1.
D1.
D1B, site and condition criteria.
Yeah.
It says site and condition criteria 1 to 3 must all be satisfied.
Oh, yes.
I'm not sure subsection 3 is going to be applicable in every case. And I don't think it's going to be applicable in cases where the tree or stand is exclusively on city-owned property. That's not within a right-of-way.
Yeah.
It applies to private property, and it applies to, I imagine, both types of right-of-ways, because you're going to have adjoining property owners.
I wonder, though, if a protective covenant is required here, if there has to be this sort of agreement for that to get signed.
Again, not the protective covenant doesn't apply in each instance.
Mhm.
Are you going to put a protective covenant on a stand of trees in Atkinson Memorial Park?
Well, good.
Or, or is it just going to be known as a heritage grove? I mean, maybe that's a question that should be entertained.
Well,
But if it's strictly on city-owned property, do you need a protective covenant?
I would actually think you would, because there's no guarantee that the
Okay.
city will.
Okay, then you're going to have to go back in that instance, Chair Boyce, to the first issue I raised, which is that section C, review process, subsection 4, following approval by city commission. All right, because in that section, this is on page 4 of 8, that subsection
Right, I
4,
got it.
following approval by the city. It is only in subsection A where a protective covenant. Actually, no, I'm sure that's not true. I guess there's a protective covenant in 4A and 4C. So if the question would be, do you want a protective covenant in section 4B also? Do you want it in the instances of any public right-of-way, including the City of Oregon City? Well,
Yeah,
actually, see, that's another issue, because I'm not sure.
Okay, actually, we've got public right-of-way covered in 2 of these places, B and C.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if those could be combined, or if that's the best route. I'd have to look at this for a minute.
Well, why don't we have something about just city-owned property? There's 2 dealing with right-of-ways and none dealing with just city-owned property.
Right.
So maybe B needs to deal with just city-owned property.
Sounds like we need a work session.
Yeah, it's details, you know.
I
That's
mean,
why everybody hates law, you know.
No, I'm partly serious, because I think that we're uncovering a whole bunch of issues which are new, and they mostly have to do with consistency, but and clarification. But it does have the potential to rearrange the document significantly.
Yeah.
Right now, I would recommend we table this and sit down together as a group and work through this, because trying to wordsmith it at the point when
We're ready to.
we're about to adopt is not a good idea.
I think,
Yeah.
I agree with.
Yeah.
So, Jim, do you have any other comments about the document before we?
I agree with Pete that I think there are some consistency questions here that I think do require another go-around.
Right. So besides the consistency questions you brought up, are there any other issues in the document?
I think as far as the substance of the document itself goes, I think all the bases are covered as far as substance. It is, I think, just the question of the consistency of, those 3 types of property, and whether a covenant applies to all of them or some of them, and just having those 3 issues or those 3 types of property addressed further down the document. Sorry to make everybody's life difficult on this, but I mean,
No, you're very
Well,
thorough.
it's-
Very
yeah,
thorough.
How would you suggest that we deal with this?
Well, I
You
think
said
the
something
question
about a
with
work
respect
session.
to
But
covenant recordation on public right-of-way or property probably needs to be vetted by the city attorney and see if that's an issue at all.
I think
If it's
here-
not,
Here's how I
yeah.
think it might be, Pete.
Mm.
If you had city-owned property that's not park, or city park that is not charter park,
And urban renewal property.
How about like the Public Works Center?
Yeah.
For example.
Let's use that
Yeah.
example.
Or-
I
or-
haven't reviewed this yet.
So
I
there's
think
tax
we-
lots that say residents of Oregon City owned, and urban renewal of Oregon City, and other types of public.
Well, there's like
Yeah.
this building and the surrounding landscape. you know.
Right.
I don't think it has any huge trees,
Right.
but they could get that way.
well,
Sure.
it's property that's owned by the city that is potentially sellable, alienable, and I think urban renewal property would be the most typical example of that. Because a lot of urban renewal property is designated as something that's going to be sold for development. I think there might be a question of whether you would want to adopt a protective covenant while it is in city hands still.
Yeah, that's going to have to be decided on a case-by-case basis, I'm sure, because there may be cases where a tree is very valuable that happens to sit somewhere where it could be saved, and still develop around it. In other cases, maybe not. So, but it needs to be addressed because, otherwise we're potentially cutting out trees that should be designated under this regulation, or could be at least.
My suspicion is if it's a tax lot, you can record a covenant on it. Or, I think that may be the case, but I'll check. If it's right of way, it's some other kind of document.
Well, that's
Yeah.
an interesting point. I don't know the law on that, so.
I don't either.
Yes, that's what lawyers are for.
So basically, excuse me, Pete, are there like two questions that you need to clarify, or three? Or
Well, there's the two legal questions, it sounds like, and then there's just the organization of the document with
Yeah.
respect to
So the legal questions.
designation being complete upon, the addition of language with respect to designation is fairly straightforward.
So what's the specific legal question again?
Whether a covenant will adequately do the job of protecting a tree on public property or not.
Just simply,
Or-
Is that the
or just
question?
simply simple designation
Or s-
or if a public of a
Right.
covenant, a protective covenant is
Okay.
advisable.
Okay, yeah.
Well, what I don't want to see happen is that some tree gets designated on, say, park land, and 25 years from now, someone that has no remembrance of that is hired, and they start cutting the trees down because there's no covenant, and no.
That's a good
So that's why I think we need to be consistent and hold the city to the same rules as everybody else.
Yeah, and I think the reason that we've been using using covenants rather than easements is because the covenants are easier to record and easements are not so
An
much,
easement
yeah.
would
Yeah.
require meets and bounds and all that, I believe, wouldn't they?
Well, yeah, and depending on the county surveyors, it has certain problems with vegetation easements and landscape easements and other types of easements being recorded by the city. So the covenant was a way to do that on private property that we've been using fairly often for street trees. And then the language of the covenant that we were drafting for implementation of this code is legally the language is different, but it does the same kind of thing.
Yeah, that part I don't really question, so
Yeah.
that's good.
So basically, you're going to get back to us then, if something is required, there'll be some suggested language, or?
Yeah, I suggest what we do is have a work session before the next NRC meeting. We may need to reschedule the NRC meeting so it doesn't collide with the library board meeting, so we have some time. We may need to select something other than a second Wednesday of the month, if we want to hammer this out on the same night, so that when we actually go to approve it, we can just do that after we have a work session. Just thinking timing-wise. That
Does
may
the
be
work
one way to-
session have to be held here in this venue? or-
No, I mean, this is just a convenient spot. It is a public meeting.
Yeah.
Publics can sit in and, listen type thing. And then it's not like a formal hearing by any means, but, I think it's much more informal than that. So, and we usually do a round table. Yeah.
Yeah, and if it needs to be recorded, that's all set up.
Good point.
Yeah.
Because you are
Okay.
deliberating on something, so, yeah.
Okay, so we'll have to look forward to
Okay.
yet another copy of this, and
Sure. Well,
we can email them out, and
yep.
there we go.
Yeah, okay. So, sounds like the consensus of the committee is to table it for a work session at a date to be announced and take into account the comments that we've written down.
Okay, any further comment on that? Okay, then we've approved that.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's go on to NRC member reports. I've got one. Performed the first transit of the box culvert under the freeway the other day, and it's high and dry. It's not muddy, and there's actually 2 small berms that prevent it from draining completely in the winter, which could be dug out even by hand. That would dry it out quite a bit more in the winter if it was ever decided that that would actually be used for getting between different divided parts of the city, like the mayor's been talking about, and so on. I do have a call into Doug Neely because he was interested in that, but I haven't talked with him directly yet. He was out of touch at the time I called earlier today.
Now, which culvert are you talking about?
There's a big box culvert near, well, the downhill end is near Clackamas Cove. It was put into,
okay. Yeah.
It's huge. It's like 15 feet high, and there's 2 of them parallel with each other. The state actually drove a tractor through it so they could get to the other side to mow down some of the brush and grass that was there, because they've been having trouble with drainage, and part of it, they've mowed all along Agnes Avenue, and they twice now, and they appear to be trying to figure out what's going on. They have pipes that don't seem to work and other ones that are, and so they're doing a study of that whole area. But anyway, this box culvert was there to equalize pressure during the major floods, because it's down well under, the bottom of it's probably maybe under 40 feet. I haven't measured it exactly, but in that neighborhood. So it gets 10 feet deep down there during a major flood. And so, it's only, if it was ever used publicly, it would have to have some way of breaking off public access during those big flood events, which do impact that whole area pretty major. I remember looking down, and a little ways past Home Depot during the 96 floods, everything was underwater,
Right.
and including that box culvert.
So there are some challenges to that being a
Yeah, and then,
access way of any kind.
right, and the other problem being that there's a railroad there on the one side.
Mhm.
The other side, it's very easily accessed from Clackamas Cove. And that is where it appears to drain to. The pipe heads right to where there's some outflows at the corner near that little parking lot on the south end. So anyway, it's something that people have been talking about for 2 or 3 years, and nothing's really been done about it. For one thing, it was solid blackberries until just recently, and now it's been mowed flat, and you can see what's there. You couldn't tell that there was 2 small berms blocking the drainage before, and now you can. And that's something that could easily be fixed, which would make use in the winter there much easier.
And it would allow connection to where?
Well, from
You and I know, but just for
from Clackamas Cove to the side of the city where there's the end of the Oregon Trail, the Amtrak station, Home Depot, that area. And it also would allow access to that new big wetland drainage area that was built as part of the jug handle, because it comes out very close to that. And there is a small creek that flows right through that area that this handles drainage from, but that's not its main purpose. So anyway, interesting. I do have
Very
photos in the iPhone if anybody wants to look at them.
3 years ago, Brian and I, and I don't remember who from this group, but took the mayor on a walking tour, had all sorts of documents from the Tucson wildlife wetlands that they've created from their pollution control plant. And it's one of the biggest attractions in Tucson, Tucson environmental wetlands, I think they call it. And it's a major attraction because the birding that it draws. And I think, Brian, you and I and others thought, wouldn't it be neat to have that on the east side of the cove, along Agnes Avenue where the drainage is so bad. And then we didn't know about the new Hiram Strait wetlands. I'd like to suggest that name, because it was in the donation land claim of Hiram Strait. Anyway, it could make a wonderful interconnected thing all the way through, as Brian was pointing out, to the north gateway to the city, which is Metro.
I'll just pass this one around real quick. The box culvert is to the left of this picture. You can see the high land between it and the drain pipe. So that'll give you some idea. Okay, anybody else?
Well, Brian and I and John and others met to look at the possibilities of restoring Metro South wetlands, which are about a 3-acre area of land adjoining Metro's solid waste facility. The whole thing's 30 years old. Many years ago, we built this. Shaw remembers this. The Environmental Learning Center built those wetlands, and then it's been kind of under-maintained. And then John and others had suggestions about trying to clean up other messes in that area. And so we met with Carlotta Collette to try to figure out how we could approach this. And by the way, I did follow through with Rosemary Navarro, John, and there is interest from her in supporting the concept. The concept would be getting youth down there for 2 years running to take on that north end of the city and try to make a commitment to the Metro South wetland area and enhancing that, some areas adjoining, I don't know what you call them, the railroad tracks between Clackamas Sand and Gravel. And then the east side of Washington Street, where there are some existing wetlands that you guys maintain. Is that correct?
Where at?
East side of Washington Street, where there are existing low troughs and swales next to the landfill.
Yes.
Okay. Looking at that whole area as a major youth involvement project with a commitment made by Metro and others to fund youth stipends to the junior ROTC in Oregon City. That would be the one focus, and try to really take on that whole area to get youth involved in making a difference, because it's the entry to the city, and it doesn't look bad, but it doesn't look as good as it could. So anyway, we'll keep you informed about that. And then I was asked to plan, well, I didn't ask, I offered to plan a heritage tour of some type to look at our trees and the fall foliage and all that. So I'm proposing here, and Pete and I need to go over this, but first of all, October 5th is the date we chose. Turns out it's one of 2 days of the major heritage festival here celebrating the city, just like last year's bridge opening. They did a two-day thing. So it would occur at the same time. I talked to Danielle Cohen, who's the TDC director for the county. I know her very well, and she thought it would probably work in well, but one way or the other, this thing would happen on Saturday, October 5th, from 9 a.m. until 12 noon, embarking, the suggestion was at Blue Heron, because that's where they want people to gather that day. All their activities are going to be held at Blue Heron, the entry to Blue Heron plant. There's a large parking lot right next to the tunnel. I don't know what you call that parking lot.
I don't think it has a name.
About an acre of land right there that could handle easily 44 people on a 44-person bus. I'm looking at a bus because I'm not sure that the trolleys are ever going to be available. Nancy Bush told me that they're going to go away again. So we run from there at 9 a.m. to Museum of the Oregon Territory overlook, where you can really do a nice overlook in a quiet parking lot of the falls, okay? Or we could just stay on 99E for that matter and do the falls overlook there to get a bigger picture of what you see in terms of fall foliage and colors and assemblages of plants. Run then south to places, I'll just give you a quick example, to the Kanema Bluffs area, which should be beautiful that time of the year. Work back through South End Road to Brighton Overlook, which is the most amazing view of the city, where you see the geologic lay of the city overlooking the city from an elevation of about 400 feet. Then conduct our dendro catching program. You've heard of geocaching? This is looking for things under rocks and whatever. Well, dendro means tree, that we go out and look at some things in the field between 10:30 now and noon, such as Rivercrest Park, which is an assemblage of former wetland areas, and the Hartke farms that were there and their wetlands. They're all dried up now, but the plants are still there. Captain Ainsworth House, we know about that. That's one of our heritage trees, Ponderosa. Through Clackamas Community College, working our back, looking at the assemblages of plants in there. All this is driving time now. Down Newell Creek Canyon with a lot of interpretation about the uniqueness of Newell Creek Canyon. And the nuts and bolts of that is it's a north-facing canyon with cool air draining from the top to the bottom daily. It is like going to Virginia during the winter, during the fall. You see fall colors in there in high contrast because of the microclimate that happens to exist over that 1,000-acre area. Then continue to south to Metro South Wetland, because we turn off there, drive by the end of the Oregon Trail, and look at, if we could, the Hiram Strait Wetlands, just as a thought, okay? Your new wetland complex. Hiram Strait had 600 acres of a donation land claim right there. And then end up going through Clackamas Cove, stopping back on McLaughlin as we return south at the falls, at the Willamette View Terrace deck, brand new deck, because there's room for a bus, and arrive by 12 noon. I'd like to spend some time on John and others discussing, if he's open to or your staff, McLaughlin Boulevard Phase 1 and 2. What happened and what's going to happen. So this is a chance to look at trees in assemblages and individually over a 3-hour period. And I did this kind of thing about 9 years ago when John was mayor. John Williams was mayor. And we called it something similar to this, but I think I'll know we'd fill this up just like that with all the events going on at Blue Heron that day. So what we need to do, Pete, is you and I get together on this and see what's feasible. I did get some quotes on buses. I'm doing that for another purpose, and I got a lot of bus companies right now I'm talking to. So, and if we could keep this around $400, it'd be nice.
I sent a tickler to Tony about that, so
Yeah.
we need to kind of get a tentative tour map as well, so we can look that over and then get the word out early enough so that we get good attendance.
Sure.
Yeah, so, okay,
Okay.
great.
I just opened up the staff report document. There's the trolley bridge mentioned, which I almost skipped over. I don't have a lot new to report. Metro is seriously looking at purchasing that and planning for what they're going to do once they do. They have not actually committed to it yet, though, fully. But they have committed to studying it. So that's a positive step, because that trolley bridge could be a real welcome addition, and it would lend itself to running events and stuff like that once it's in place. You could actually do a loop crossing 2 different bridges, for instance, and
that would be good.
And the trails lead all the way into Portland and so on. So
And
a lot of potential there, and I think that Oregon City has to pay attention to the fact that there's a lot of athletic events going on here, like that yearly triathlon, where you can go down there at least a couple of nights a week and find people practicing down at the Cove. They're there all the time. It's bringing people into the city. So, and I just see the trolley bridge as part of all of that sort of positive
those events
development.
Tend to get more popular each year too.
Oh yeah, and that one that triathlon started at 275 people, which is real large.
It's
so
amazing.
It's got a lot of potential, we think. Okay.
We're ready for the next item.
Any other member reports?
Good.
Okay. Okay, let's go on to the McLaughlin Boulevard Phase 2.
All right. So John is
I didn't read the staff
volunteered.
report. I didn't realize there was a
Okay,
staff
yeah,
report.
so
Go
what,
ahead.
I'll explain briefly that. I did a short staff report, and I attached the McLaughlin Phase 2 public tree removal permit request. And now John is here. We can talk in more broader terms about the project before we circle back around and talk about the trees.
Okay.
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 Yeah.
So somebody closed all my files.
I didn't close it, I just...
Well, they're not here anymore.
Really?
Yeah. I had all the PDFs loaded up here, which is unfortunate because it takes a while to reload those. I left a note here for you, not to close my files.
I didn't close it. I did not close those. Laura must. I'm going to blame her.
Okay, well then I got to do my thing here and get. Well, you guys got something else to go over? Well,
Yes.
did you log in differently? Did somebody?
I did not change anything. I just went like Control F8, which just controls the projector.
Where's the directories?
What time is that open house on the 25th of September?
Where's all the directories?
Ryan, do you know?
I don't know that. I'm guessing it's in the evening, but I don't really know.
Community development, that's wrong. How do we get to...
Oh, that's what happened. Laura logged out.
Huh.
Yeah, she didn't want to be responsible for any further activity.
Oh, this is unfortunate.
So,
How do I log out?
go there.
Well, let me pass these out here.
Something much more interesting to history.
Share these with everybody here.
Something like that.
Laura.
This is the last of the river tours that we're doing. We've been really successful with these. And look at the guides on the back. Brian's one of them, of course. And Chef Boyardee's up in the upper left-hand portion. They're an incredible chef that produces stuff out of native plants. So we've been really blessed on these things. We've had hundreds of people sign up for these things. And I believe now there's a market. That was part of the issue for doing this. The county sponsored these things in part. The intention of seeing if a market could develop. And Portland Spirit is my target right now because Brian and I work together on these things. It's a year-round vessel, and we could do things besides summer cruises. We could be able to do things during the winter and spring months. So I want you to be aware of those. All right. That's pretty.
I'm sorry for the delay.
On behalf of the planning department, I apologize for the delay. And I would take it up with the powers that be.
Does that mean inefficient planning?
I think it's technical problems. Best laid plans.
Are we gonna do 6B then, maybe?
6B is going to be, take a little time, and I don't want to take up John's time. So.
See, I'm about there. Okay, so I wanted to. There's been some recent interest in the McLaughlin Boulevard Phase 2 project, and maybe that's not necessarily accurate. It's probably been long time interest. And so I've got an email recently from Metro Commissioner Carletta Collette about a concern that was brought to her attention, and it sounds like Jerry and Brian and Richard all met with her on Friday last week. And so the issue is with regard to some existing trees that are located along the front of the Rivershore Hotel on Dunes Drive. So that's what I'm kind of here to talk about a little bit, is just give you a little more understanding of what the constraints are there and maybe some history. And so this drawing here, I'll have it on your computer. It's not on this one. Do you have it on your screens?
You flip your,
Presentation.
yeah.
Did we get anything other than that? Okay.
There it is.
Ask
There we
them
go.
what's-
Presentation, push to the left,
Okay.
down to the bottom, your toggle.
Oh, yeah, you told me that.
That's McDonald's.
Yeah, and so
I follow instructions.
there we go. A little further.
Apparently not.
Okay.
Learning by
So this graphic here is kind of an original concept plan. When the city applied for the Metro Regional Flex Funds grants, they put together some drawings and some estimates. They're always conceptual because you don't have the money at that point in time to actually put the engineering effort into it. You put some very preliminary engineering, and at that time there was a plan to put a round, well, I wouldn't even call it a roundabout, it was a traffic circle at Dunes Drive and Clackamas Drive, and all the other improvements that we show that are kind of off the screen, but are pretty similar to what we're doing right now with improvements along Firestone Alley and along 99E. And at the time, that little bridge and the squiggly lines underneath it represented kind of a water quality feature and some kind of entry treatment right there. So the plan was at the time to utilize the large right-of-way. So if you look at this line right here, this is right-of-way line right here, was to use this parcel for stormwater treatment. It's already kind of got some of that. There's a culvert that is actually crossing the McDonald's driveway here, and the intent was to look at that space for water quality. The other piece is that the city also got a $240,000 grant from ODOT through their stormwater retrofit program to build the stormwater facility and basically treat the stormwater that is untreated on 99E. Right now, the stormwater collects along 99E in the various catch basins, and that is actually piped under the Rivershore Hotel. I say under it. It goes under the breezeways where you get to the back parking lot in there, and then discharges out on Johnstorm Park in that area between Clackamas Drive and the river, and meanders along that area, which Jerry and his crew and Scott Archer and his crew have kind of been maintaining. So there's a shallow ditch along there that that water eventually makes its way down into the river. So
does that get filtered at all in that process?
there's no official water quality. There is vegetation along there,
Right.
but there's erosion and there's some other problems along there. But it does. It's not like it's a pipe that dumps into the river right there. It's a pipe that dumps into the toe of the slope and then meanders across that. There's a pathway it meanders across and kind of gets down there. So
And the basin that's there is about 1,000 square feet of sedge-lined situation with Douglas Fire around it.
So the city at some point, the regional flexible funds grant requires a match, and of that match, Urban Renewal applied $1 million. So I think we got a $3 million grant from regional flex funds. Urban Renewal has allocated another $1 million, and then of course the $240,000 grant for the stormwater retrofit. Okay, so happy to get the funds, moving forward with the project through the initial design phase, sit down with the Urban Renewal Commission, and there were several project elements, not just the stormwater facility, but several project elements that kind of met some resistance. Some things for instance, the sidewalk connectivity here was a major concern. Any encroachment on these parcels, even though they're not urban renewal parcels. So do you show this on your screen, or do you have to look up?
I think I can see it.
This, unfortunately, I can't get a pointer here, but you see the crosshatch that
I can barely tell that it's there. It's just very faint, though.
Yeah.
It keeps moving. It's up here.
Oh,
Then they'll have to turn
Yeah,
around, I
it's-
think. But anyway, that
there's
red pathway right there.
yeah.
There's a setting in Windows where you can blow up the cursor somewhere. I forget where.
If you look up here,
Yeah.
this
Oh, okay.
that idea kind of went away because
Who
there
owns
was
that piece of property?
the city does,
City does.
not urban renewal. It's a city property. It's
Okay,
not
that's
urban
it.
renewal property.
Okay.
This one is though,
Okay.
and the concern was that if we build a stormwater facility here, it further kind of jeopardizes the ability for this to develop. And so the stormwater facility, and actually I think early on the city was already ready to get rid of this traffic circle, but that was another element that we decided to go away as a result of our discussions with the Urban Renewal Commission. So that was I didn't attend that meeting, but from what I understand, we had pretty strong consensus from the Urban Renewal Commission that was not the right place for a stormwater facility. And then our design team also looked at it, and while it makes a nice depression over in this area, in order to prevent that from kind of meandering out into what was not property, wasn't right away, that would have required some kind of a berm to keep it, in this right-of-way area, and then somehow getting either replacing that culvert and moving it over here, So there was some issues associated with putting it there, and I think the design team at that point realized, well, if we don't have support for that, we're going to move. We should look closer at this area. It's also public right of way, and to be honest, I think the design team saw less. There was those design concerns here were not over here that they had. Obviously, there's trees there which are coming up as concerns now. But the other thing about this project is that because it's all in the floodplain, there's a requirement for balanced cut and fill. So,
Excuse me, John, what is it draining? Where's the drainage coming from?
90-90.
What area, though? I mean,
It handles catch basins along this frontage and further out along this frontage. So it'll essentially eliminate that collection system that goes under the hotel.
approximately a half a mile each way, or quarter of a mile, or roughly.
I'll have to look for that, but I think it goes. The project plans show it going to the intersection where the off ramp off of 205 onto 99E, if you're headed northbound, goes there. So I think it stretches that far.
The tree strip right there, that's owned by the individuals that own or the company owns the hotel then?
Well, it's public right of way, but it's like any public
Outside
right of
the yellow
way.
line is public.
Oh,
Actually,
okay.
so this is all public right of way here, but these improvements were done as a part of the rest of the hotel frontage improvements. So they're all part of the landscape plan for the hotel. So
Do we have any clear idea how much water this is really going to be at any point in time?
we've got I can't tell you that number, but the design team's got a specific design flow that they're designing this facility for.
Okay.
Okay.
Before we move past this point, just for clarification, everything south of Dunes Drive is being collected presently by a system that goes beneath Rivershore Hotel.
Yes.
All right, and I understand that it also wells up during heavy storm flows in their parking bays beneath the hotel. So I was told.
I've not heard that.
Yeah, well, that's what they were telling me. But is there anything to the north end of Dunes, to the north? Is that really going to come that way, or how can it?
Yeah,
because of grades.
most of this drains this way, so I know there's some catch basins and some piping planned on this end as well.
So you can bring it back to some central point, even from the north.
Right. So that central point's right about
All
here,
right.
and then from here it gets piped to the swale
Okay.
and on out.
All right.
So there would be a pipe underneath the road here, is that what you're saying?
It actually ties into that existing drainage system out from the roadway here.
Okay, so you might have to put something new across their driveway, but not across the road.
That's right.
Okay.
But essentially, the wooded area would be a bioswale?
It is, and I'll get to that in just a minute. So I'm just trying to give you a little bit
Right.
of background about how we got to where it is now. And the other point that I wanted to make about this is that this project, which has some fill associated with it, because if you remember, we're moving those sidewalks on 99E out into what are pretty steep areas. So there's some gabion walls that are planned for that. So there is some fill associated with that. So in order to balance the cut and fill on this was also seen as an advantage over this one, because this one requires fill and this one essentially doesn't. It counts for part of our cut actually under this new plan. So
And the reason this one doesn't need fill versus the other one needing fill is you would have to, on the north side of Dunes, you'd have to contain the water to keep it from
you'd have to
affecting the usability of that land.
right. You'd have to
All
build a berm over there.
Did anybody look at deepening the swale, a new swale, to create a trough for the water to then flow?
No, because the slopes there, Jerry, are pretty. I mean, that's a pretty good drop off already.
Okay.
And again, trying to find, I suppose the option could be to build another pipeline out here and build some kind of a water facility out here. But again, this is really our limits of our area of influence that we, through this project, guess that's the other thing. This is a federally funded project, so federal funding requires the state and the city to develop and approve what they call a project prospectus. And once you've done that, and modifying that project prospectus is like working with Union Pacific, can be quite a challenge sometimes. So that project prospectus allows, we identify where our project limits are. Changes to that require a fair amount of scrutiny that,
And presently, your project boundary is where on the west side
the west
of this
side.
whole project?
Yeah, I believe it's right in here, Jerry.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so we got a project. We're moving forward with design, and until and I guess the other point is the design team. This isn't necessarily a new topic about these trees. I think Jerry's been talking with the design team, and maybe even you, Brian. I'm not sure, but they've been pretty aware of some of the concerns that I'm hearing, more recently here. So I'm going to move on to a different graphic, unless you got any more questions kind of about how we got to where we are right now. It's weird how these things work great when you've got them lined up, and then they don't work so good when you. Okay, swale impact. There's two side-by-side PDFs. This is, let's see.
John, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
What gave that one parcel that interesting shape where the right-of-way for Dunes Drive is so wide in the first place?
I believe it was ODOT right-of-way. It's always been ODOT right-of-way. And so whenever they built 99E, my guess is they platted it that way.
Yeah, I bet it goes back to some early donation land claim that wasn't north and south. A lot of them weren't in this area.
Urban Renewal's asked about the idea of vacating some of that, and that may be an option in the future. But so this is, did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is essentially a layout of the stormwater quality facility that the designers are working on. And this is just a legend to tell you that marker means remove trees. So we're not actually removing a tree right there, but all these are existing trees that would need to be, that are proposed and need to be removed. So, and the blue represents kind of the top of the cut, if you will, for the swale that's going to take water from this pipe, meander through this swale to another pipe that'll be right here, and then go out and over to the existing catch basin that sits over here.
Okay, so the exit point is still across Dunes Drive at some point.
Exit point is not across. Well, yeah. What do you mean across? It stays on this side of Dunes Drive, Jerry.
Right, but it crosses, not Dunes, I'm sorry, crosses Edgewater, Clackamas,
It ties into a catch basin that sits right here.
to then eventually go into John Storm Park.
Right.
Okay.
John, one of the things I helped maintain a 7th Street Bridge mitigation project like this out in Gresham, and we had to put in logs perpendicular to the flow because what happened, you get like major water events, and there's a tendency for the water to cut down, and the narrower the channel gets, the quicker the water flows, the less water quality benefits you get because you don't have that much interaction with the vegetation or chance to infiltrate. Is there any consideration of getting some kind of logs or boulders?
You got great questions, Bob. You do, and I'm going to show you.
All right, it's going to tell from these illustrations.
Yeah, it'll show. I'll show you some details that'll help that. But the answer to your question is there's several cross dams, if you will, to kind of hold that water back and keep smaller pools that allow it to pond and then spill and then pond and then spill.
And everything's just to get it kind of spread out a little bit to get more
Right.
surface area contact.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So one of the things that the design team had done, and I think, Jerry, this was based on some of your early involvement in the project, was just kind of looking pretty close at what the impacts of these trees are. And if you've ever walked this site, and 3 of you have, I don't know if you have, Shab, before, but there's a lot of surface roots on these that are both from the junipers and some of the other plantings, but a lot, so it's hard to differentiate what's juniper and what's tree, but a lot of that is, in fact, in this corner right here, we see roots that have actually migrated out into the face of the curb. So, and a lot of these trees are built on mounds, and I don't know if they did that on purpose or if that was just kind of the natural way in which they graded them. But
I suspect it was for horticultural reasons. It's too wet in there for the trees,
Exactly.
at least part of the year.
yeah,
That's to keep them up out of the...
our geotech report didn't necessarily show that, but the several of the trees. So that what's also shown on here is a meandering sidewalk. And the meander, if you remember from some of the concepts, was so that we could provide some plantings to kind of separate the pedestrian from the walkway. So there'll be trees planted in each of these little basins right here. So there's 3 trees planted on each side of the roadway that it would be more like a street tree. And then, of course, the sidewalk would also have to meander around those. So the back edge of that is 10 feet from the face of the curb. And so, these trees that are so close to the curb are definitely needing to be removed. And these 3 trees here are also needing to be removed. We're actually going to extend that sidewalk and driveway, replace that driveway across here, but all 3 of these are also impacted by the construction of the sidewalk. So those 3 need to be removed. So back to the pond, and just kind of looking at this from more of a section perspective, because I think that's the most telling piece. This section, and I'm going to show you a better drawing of this, but this is kind of showing what the finished grading line is going to look like. And this dotted line that comes across here is where the existing grade is. So the dotted line means existing grade, the red line means the finished grade, and then these little dotted lines here kind of reflect a little bit of the section of what this thing's going to look like. This thing is actually going to have some filtered media in it, if you will. It's a soil blend, but it's made for stormwater treatment facilities. And then down here in this thing, there'll actually be a collection pipe and some drain rock that will, should that water not necessarily so we don't see anything that makes it through that media and collects in that storm drain will then be piped out of that, piped along the entire length of this swale and into that collection system and out of the facility.
How deep is the the to be created swale compared to what it is now?
It varies, Jerry, but some of it looked to me like it's 3 or 4 feet deep.
All right, and then the additional collection.
So we'll look at that in a different section.
The reason I'm asking, then the additional collection below that, including the very bottom pipe, would put it probably 10 or 12 feet deep. Is that not true?
Down here?
Yes.
I don't think quite that deep, but yeah, it's quite a bit deeper. This is 18 inches, and then 6 inches below that is the top of a pipe.
Okay.
A 6-inch pipe. So I believe these are 2.5 feet from here to here. So that gives you some perspective. So let's see now if I can actually get this to. So what the design firm did is they created a section for each of these trees. So this is station 107 plus 50, and there's 107 plus 50. And the next one's 107 plus 85, and that's the next one. So we'll look at number 2. I can just do it this way. That's this tree in the middle of the pond, and kind of where it is in relationship to the grading of this basically this channel. They've done that for every tree. Jerry, they did this weeks ago, so I think this may have had something to do with some of the concerns that you were raising about this early on. That's number 3, station 107 plus 85. There's 107 plus 85. And they go through all of these locations, and they've recorded the ground elevation and where we kind of need to be with the bottom of that swale. Fourth tree, fifth tree. The last tree. And, you know, I know you guys are better tree experts than I am, but you know, even surface excavation around these trees would be detrimental to that type of tree. So there's just the finish grade. There's also the constructability of this stuff. That's the finish grade, but like I said, in these areas where we've got to build this channel, we're going to have to go much deeper.
Right.
So I'm going to close these and share another couple other drawings. Bear with me here. So
Just for point of clarification, the blue area doesn't describe water, it describes excavation
it's
impact areas.
area of
Okay.
the.
All right.
So this is more of a profile from top to bottom.
Okay.
So these steps here represent steps. And I'll show you a section of what this is going to look like right here. But the idea is you daylight out of a pipe, you go at a reasonable slope across, you have a bit of a dam that holds that water up, and then it spills over again and does the same thing along here. And this facility, I don't have the specific flow characteristics or flow quantities, but it's based on a particular rate of flow. I heard something like these basins need to hold that water for at least 9 seconds. So at some particular storm, that's how that system's designed to function.
Now, the water's flowing through the pipe or it's flowing on the surface?
Water comes out of this pipe right here, okay?
Okay.
It daylights, and then in theory it runs through a series of check dams and filter media and would daylight here. Now, there's also a subsurface pipe that also collects that. So
What's kind of the ratio, you think, between what would be below the surface and what would
well,
be...
most of it's supposed to stay on top of the surface.
Okay.
I mean, if these things are working right, there's some infiltration going on there, evaporation, transpiration, and flow. But in the wettest season, in the peak storm, everything's wet.
And it's planted, right? So the plants.
All these are heavily planted.
Yeah.
One question about the planting is, it's an isolated area surrounded by pavement and car usage and stuff like that. And, you're practically running over ducks at Fred Meyer and Hagen's and stuff just because they're wandering off away from the ponds and things. Is there any thought given with the vegetation to try and make sure not to attract? I mean, I'm seeing actually geese being hit on the entrance to 205.
Right, Milwaukee Marketplace.
Yeah.
Well, geese collect in the parking lot of McDonald's right now.
Right.
So
Well, yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is what we might want to do is not increase, depending on if it's fruit bearing, whatever it is, not try to attract the kind of wildlife that's going to wander out of this, kind of narrow preserve and get run over.
the plantings that I've seen, and again, I'm not the expert here, but have a lot of sage. So sage, grasses,
Sure.
and in the bottom of this, so that it's not really a pond; it's more of a filter.
Yeah.
So-
Geese are attracted to true grass, not to sedges or rushes. So if you stick to the sedges and rushes, which do well in this sort of situation, then you'd be in much better shape, rather than making a lawn out of it, in other words.
There's no plan for lawn.
Right. I didn't think so. Right.
So
I
in
think
this
people are pretty aware
in
of
this
that.
drawing, there's what's not shown here is those little dams. They're made out of, and I've got a better picture which I'll show you, but just so you get a perspective, those little check dams, if you will, are half-inch steel plate that's tied into that's got a concrete foundation under it. So there's a concrete foundation under here, and then at some point, this is a design detail that's still being worked out. That pipe that runs from one end to the other, will have to be under all of that. So again, if these are 2.5 feet here, you know, you're all every bit of 2.5 feet right here, plus, you know, plus that section that we looked at earlier.
Right.
So we, you know, the constructability of this, I guess what I'm saying is when we build this thing, there's going to be a significant hole there, significant impact.
This is high impact construction. It has to be.
This, but keep in mind, this is the intent here is to be a stormwater filter to actually strip pollutants out of that water to the degree that soil and plants and evaporation and transpiration can do that. Right? There's probably other pollutants that this won't pick up, but this is pretty typical for a stormwater infiltration kind of facility that's designed to improve water quality.
Right.
So this is a good thing. I get
Right.
the concern for trees. So here's another section of kind of what that that facility looks like. So again,
Grass side.
water quality, what they call water quality mix, and then, you know, drain rock in that pipe system. So, and then these are, you know, designed to be at a 4-to-1 slope so that they're not, you know, we're spreading that flow over a wide area so that the velocities stay pretty low. Okay.
And a good example of what would be workable to look at for this group would be to go up to Warner Milne next to Walgreens, and there's a similar nice looking facility there that was put in. Is that not true?
There
with,
is.
with the steel weirs.
There is, but I don't
Not
believe
as
that's
big,
quite as
And certainly
quite I don't remember if there's under drainage in that one, Jerry.
there is. I watched them put it in. Matter of fact, I photographed it.
John, could you go back down again,
Yeah.
just in the same illustration where you were? Just have you guys know, it does say grass side slopes.
Well, but the plantings are not that way.
Okay, I'm not trying to be picky. I'm just
We're
saying.
gonna, and actually, I can show you specifically their plantings. Although I didn't have pictures of what they were calling there, but we can look at the landscape plan for that. But yeah, it's not intended for grass. So, and I can bring any of these back up. I just kind of want to get through them. So, again, thinking about what that check dam system looks like. Here's that 1/2-inch weathered steel plate, and this kind of concrete foundation to keep that in place. So the water, again, backs up along this, is used as a settling basin, and then as it exceeds that, it breaks over and goes into the next one and does the same kind of thing. So, you know, again, I was just thinking about constructability of this thing as I was looking more and more into, you know, what impact does this have? Is there any way to, you know, just because we showed those cross sections, is there a way to meander around that a little bit? You know, no, there's just not. Knowing what I know about construction, there's not. You can argue that it's the wrong spot, but we're well beyond that one at this point. So, so now I have the landscape plan, which I kind of wanted to share. It's not open anymore, but I'm going to go back there.
Will
and
this
see.
allow the oil?
What's that?
The oil runoff from the
this will-
streets?
Metals,
Certainly.
heavy metals,
I see oil, just oil, you know, from leaking motors and stuff.
right? There's some filtration of that as well.
Yes.
If I can do this without. This, Jerry, you've seen this one, right? You and Brian have kind of looked at the landscape plan.
We've looked at the landscape plan.
So they actually sent me photographs of a lot of these plants. And landscape plans are great for landscapers, but they're really difficult to read. But some of the, I'm just trying to remember what kind of planting. So 17
See,
says,
ground cover, there's ceanothus, which is a broadleaf evergreen, juniper, kinnikinnick, some
slender rush. There we go. Slender rush and
340.
red trig dogwood. So that's,
Yeah, I think that's a dwarf one. I'm not entirely positive, though.
planting is heavy here, and one of the things that we've kind of talked about since kind of this issue came up was, okay, there's not options here, which, you know, all these projects, and it's not just these projects, you know, not just this project, but other projects, we're often finding ourselves with these hard constraints that kind of don't give much room for compromise. And, whether that be, a permit definition that says you can't go outside this workspace, budget, property lines, schedules. There's just a variety of those kinds of constraints that kind of make life difficult sometimes. But what we did talk about was, right now they're showing these as 2-inch caliper.
Alaska yellow cedar, primarily, which is good.
Okay, say that you guys all know that, but Alaskan cedar, right?
Yep.
Right.
Weeping Alaskan cedar.
Yep.
So we talked to them about, well, for one, that they don't specify those by caliper, but I think they were like 6-foot trees.
Right.
It's not very
And
big.
my thought was, well, what, it would look better anyway to have some variety there. Not necessarily variety in type, but variety in height. Can we go with bigger trees? Can we, our city manager is pretty keen to kind of heritage trees and wanting to see the city plant more of those. Can we, change out and add more of those? Can we go ahead and place some trees along here that might make sense? So we're looking at trying to spot 4 or 5 evergreen kind of heritage trees. We've got a heritage tree list on your tree planting list. Now, when talking to the landscape architect on those, he had several thoughts about which ones made sense and which ones didn't. And so we're
For this plan?
for this plan.
Okay.
And so, they're planning to add 4 or 5 larger, whether if it's a evergreen, 12 to 16 foot kind of a tree versus a 6-foot tree.
Right.
And if they're deciduous, then 4 to 6-inch caliper trees. They don't like them, and they don't like to use those necessarily because the survival rate is a little harder. There's a lot more maintenance that goes into those.
The establishment period, yeah.
But I also understand that there's a desire to, have some difference in the tree types and the tree canopies and the tree sizes early on. Now, when I look at the Phase 1 project, which is, where the Phase 1 project is, it's on the other side of 205. I look at those trees today down there and what they originally planted, and that's really growing in
Beautiful.
beautifully.
8th Street to 17th Street, that's your boundary.
In fact, the same landscape architect did that, and he said,
Yes.
John, there's some trimming. He goes, let's talk because we need to do some pruning along there to kind of establish those trees to continue
Yeah.
their health and not have them filling in and going places where we don't, where they're, going to get vandalized and damaged. So so that's kind of the story. I think the other part of the story is why the Natural Resource Advisory Committee wasn't, better brought into the review process. And I don't have great answers for that other than, the city reached out in a pretty big way to get a public project advisory work group. We do that for most of our projects where we put together. This one was heavily transportation related, so we invited. I know because I staffed the transportation advisory committee. We invited them. I also attend the CIC meetings, so we invited them, and we actually decided to put this project advisory work group meeting before their CIC meeting agenda an hour before that, so that they'd have time to talk through this project. Now, I think in talking to Alita, we didn't make a specific call out to the Natural Resource Advisory Committee, but I think there was updates that were given through Pete, and I don't remember showing up and talking specifically about this one, but maybe Nancy had.
I don't remember any updates.
This is during that transition
I do not
period.
remember updates. Maybe you other members do, but I know we asked to be included in an update process. This has been excellent for
Yeah.
getting us up to speed.
The other piece is just, the department and the city, from that matter, through our public open houses, when people show an interest, we're pretty excited about it because most of the time we can't get more than a handful of people to show up to public open houses.
Right.
We just had one on the Main Street alleys, and I was there for the first hour, lightly attended. albeit different kind of project, but a lot of our projects don't garner much
Sure.
interest. So, Jerry, I know you were at those. My sense is if there was an interest in serving on that, that wouldn't have been a problem for us. We'd have had somebody who's interested with some knowledge to participate.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know where the glitch might have happened there, but I don't necessarily feel like the department should take the full brunt of that, because we do a lot to try and get public interest in these projects. So I guess that's
Okay. Well, I don't
That's
know
my
what the committee
spiel.
thinks, but I feel like the committee had an obligation to be involved here, and I think we should have asserted ourselves. And I didn't know at the only open house I attended that there was an advisory team, but that's okay. I know you normally do that. I just have a couple questions. I really appreciate the detail you've given us. I understand the issue with the project boundary. I believe that carrying this whole issue across the project boundary to the other side of Clackamas Drive would have solved the retention of trees and solved the water quality. But I don't know what you're trying to achieve with water quality, but I'm sure it could have been achieved on the slopes, below the slopes of Clackamas Drive. My question
we would have had to rebuild it, Jerry.
Pardon?
We would have had to rebuild that facility. We would have.
Yes, you
create
would,
a-
because
create a-
all it is a low swale.
Right.
Right, would have to have some work done. My question is, what's the cost of this facility, the engineered estimate? Do you know?
Well, we have a $240,000 grant. I don't know that we've even estimated this project.
Okay.
I mean, we've got a 95% design, but there's a lot of changes that came out of that 95%
Right.
design. So the whole project, my sense is the project team has a pretty good understanding, but I haven't asked for that.
Okay.
And the other thing that I hear regularly on this project is budget is tight, very tight on this project, because there's a lot of elements that are special. The gabion walls, the area, this area up here is more of a plaza, so there's going to be a lot of basalt rock used in that. There's also another steel kind of a facility right here, not a facility, but a feature right there as an entry sign. So fencing along 99E. There's a lot to this project.
Basically, could you have, it seems like a decision was made to move from the existing water quality facility, or proposed water quality facility, to the other side of the road for financial reasons in terms of developing that piece? That's
Well, I didn't sit through the meeting, but what I understood was there was opposition to doing much along there that would prohibit either vacation of the right-of-way or, discourage further development of that piece. And I heard there was consensus on that across the Urban Renewal Commission. And I think, the other piece I think is that as the design team looked at it, thinking about that cut and fill and thinking about the option of bringing it across onto this side, they saw some advantages to putting it on this side as well. And I always struggle with this because those existing trees are beautiful trees. I see them as beautiful trees. I think that design teams often see them as trees that aren't irreplaceable, and that would be different if that was an oak tree grove out there or something like that. But a lot of the trees that they see in there, they think some of them are kind of not perfect specimens, and so they think they can replace a lot of that with new vegetation.
Intuitively, it just seems to me that it would have been less expensive to develop that existing water quality facility rather than go over to this other side, destroy that, and then rebuild it. Now, I understand there was probably a decision made, maybe by the Urban Renewal Commission, I believe you said, to preserve this area north of Dunes, for maybe future development.
That's what I think it's about.
But can you just...
I would also argue that we probably I don't know that there was a lot of pros and cons to what would happen to this
Yeah.
side of the road versus what would happen on the other side of the road.
Yeah.
So I don't know that the Urban Renewal Commission was shared with all those, all those details.
Yeah.
And, in hindsight, I think that should have been,
Right.
that should have been different, and it
Well-
wasn't, but.
But you must know probably what the comparison was because your design team looked at the two options of one side versus the other. The thing that they didn't do, because the project boundary issue, we're being told, is look at the cost of conveying across Clackamas Drive and dealing with the existing swale, which would have to be improved. That would have been interesting. Then there could be a case made, is this worth, asking for a boundary adjustment? And I don't know that that's possible or not. But I want to just point out, I know the cost of the one up on top of the hill, $300,000 by Walgreens. That's what I was told, because I went and researched it. This has got to be at least that much or more, because of the size and magnitude of what you're doing.
You mean for just the swale itself? There was
I
a
mean,
little
this
bridge
whole
in there.
reconfiguration, re-engineering, all brand new trees, mitigation requirements you're trying to meet, et cetera. You didn't have any mitigation requirements up on Warner Milne, next to Walmart.
No,
Not
that was
Walmart.
Walgreens.
Walgreens.
That was a retrofit that the city
Yeah,
felt.
but that was a
valuable.
$300,000 project. I've got the detail on it. So I'm just talking concept here. It's going to be a beautiful thing. I would hope in the future we will be involved. We either assert ourselves and we're involved, or we're asked to be involved. But there's costs and effects here that could have been dealt with in a different way.
Right, but don't you think the proper place to have expressed our views would have been at the Urban Renewal Commission,
Yeah,
not?
you got it. You got it.
Right, okay.
But we didn't know what was going on,
I would
did
like
we?
I would
That's-
like to speak to this because I think this is a fundamental issue of how human beings relate to the environment. Period. That this committee, I've only been on it 4 or 5 short months. I have come up with numerous, and I'm not the one who brings them to the public's attention or to the attention of whoever, but this is happening to trees here, this is happening to trees there, this is happening to trees there. Nobody knows about it through the channels of the city. We find out about it through Brian or Richard or Jerry having their ear to the ground and being observant. So it's like, the whole concept is it's not even a consideration in the minds of the people that are doing the planning that there may be another consideration here other than how to engineer stormwater flowing through some dirt. And it's not that it's a blame, I just don't know what is the purpose of this committee. Why are we sitting here taking up 2 hours of our night when we aren't really given an opportunity to participate in the very things that we have been asked to do, which is to make comments about the natural resource aspect of what's going on in development, in restoration, whatever it is. It's very unnerving and it's disappointing. With this one, it's difficult not to be angry because it's just one more time. And there's some amazing, from my experience, people on this committee that bring to the fore some really valuable perspectives and information. And I know from working with Jerry that he works in a very cost-effective way. So he looks at projects with simple solutions that have the largest impact with the least amount of expenditure. And coming in at the beginning of a project with those views, I think is a much more useful way to take advantage of the expertise that's sitting here than to bring it to us when it's 100% designed and say, well, this is all we can do now. Well, we know that. We know that. I've gone to public meetings where they show things and you're basically told how it's going to be. It's not an opportunity to make suggestions or have opinions be heard, just my thought on it. So I think for me personally, that is the issue with asking for citizens to participate who care about things over and over and over and over and over when things are disappointing. or not processing how we feel would be an appropriate way for the use of our expertise, that's the frustration. And, you know, Jerry and I think everyone on this board is being very benevolent when they say these are good designs, but that's not really the issue. That's just my opinion, which...
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I think we strive to do that. I mean, like I said, this wasn't the first, this design wasn't the first time this came before the public. Now, maybe it didn't come to this group, but we strive to do that. I think we strive to hit a very high mark when you think about the Jug Handle project, the Warner Milne project, the McLaughlin Boulevard Phase 1 project. The design teams are as interested in natural resources as members of this committee, and the difference is that you know, whether it's an existing tree versus something new that could turn into be something great, you know, that's the difference I think that we sometimes see. But that's not to say that we don't want your input, and because I think we do. I think we try for that, but I think the harder part is it's no different than the heritage tree ordinance that you guys were talking about tonight. I was just thinking to myself, that's one more document which I haven't even reviewed, and I've got input on it. And it's timing. People are busy. People and you know, we're a group of people who, because we're so busy, don't catch this until it's like, oh, this is going out for bid. I didn't know that. Now's the time. Now I need to make a difference. When, you know, lots of times we, you know, I see what you're talking about, and I totally get it. I just think that it's not it's not something that Public Works or planning or the city necessarily is working hard to avoid. We're working hard to try to include it. I remember times when there wasn't a lot of public involvement at all in projects. We've taken public involvement to a whole new level, and every project we're trying to do the same thing. And like I said, usually these projects end up with a handful of the same people that show up for every one of those open houses. And by God, we use and abuse those people as much as we can, because they're the few people that come and comment on those. But I also get people are busy. Who wants to go to an open house on a July beautiful evening to talk about, you know, landscaping? Or a project. So I don't have the answer other than to say we do try hard. We can do better, and we will continue to try to do better.
Yeah, I
But
think
a possibility, though, was foreclosed, it sounds to me like, at the Urban Renewal Commission, you know, at the level of the Urban Renewal Commission, in terms of not developing that area north of Dunes, going to the south side instead.
If we asked them the same
That's-
question today, I don't know what they might have the same
Well-
answer. Hopefully they would have the same answer,
Yeah.
you know, or it would look like we weren't doing our job. But I think if we'd have really kind of delved into how many trees we're going to have to come out, they'd have thought harder about that. Because I don't know where the drive was from. There's a lot of people that have looked at this lot and said, what's the reality of the ability to develop that?
Yeah.
Pete, is there a flow chart? I guess what I'm trying to think of a city with kind of decision-making review process. It seems, obviously you appreciate the opportunities for kind of the general public involved and what have you, but it seems if you have a city-adopted flow chart, so these kind of projects, these are, urban renewal takes a look at it, but if it has these features, natural resources is automatically part of the process, but part of the process before the decisions are made. And I guess I'm not sure. Does the city have a flow chart that shows for different topic, different things, the way the decisions get made, so it shows the formal roles of boards and committees?
not yet. I think if you're talking about advisory committees, and
Well, yeah.
we have 8 functioning advisory committees, and then we have the planning commission and city commission. So
But
You know,
I guess what I'm trying to
we're-
talk about is kind of like the review
I
process.
think this is getting to what we've been talking about as a communications plan that.
Well, it's more
improves on
kind of a
that.
review process, an input process, so
Mhm.
if a certain kind of thing comes down,
Routing, yeah.
it gets routed,
Mhm.
Stanway through planning commission, whatever it happens to be, But, I mean, it happens with planning, doesn't it? I mean,
It happens, yeah, mostly with bodies that are agency bodies, you know what I mean? But I think your comment is a really good one, because each committee, whether it be PrAC or NRC, has some provision within their bylaws with respect to public projects. Now, historically, this is part of a legislative review which was approved in 2005, and then each subsequent phase got engineered and funded, you know, at a different rate. So we're kind of in phase 2 of a 2005 City Commission approval process, and traditionally those have been run by Public Works in accordance with city standards without a great deal of public review. But as John's referring to, that's changing.
I would also say, you know, if it's a private development project, there's lots of process
Well, yeah,
there.
it's
The
exactly right.
public projects that fall in the public right of way don't have that same level of process, but yet we do a lot of that. I mean, we do a lot of public noticing, bringing it to boards and committees, developing.
well, I guess what I'm trying to think about is just having kind of a formal, almost like a handbook. So at least if a staff person is looking for guidance, is this something to bring from natural resources? Oh, this is a flow chart. This is the kind of thing. Oh, yeah, we better try to get on their agenda. Or B, no, this doesn't meet that threshold.
And I would say
Yeah.
that I guess the one difference on public projects is if we fall under one of the natural resource overlays, then we do that. But this doesn't.
And I guess that's the dividing line that I'm talking about. If you have a flow chart saying you route it one way if it is in the natural resource overlay, it gets routed a different way if it's not. But it's a common reference, it's a common diagram that staff can refer to, that members of the committee can refer to, the public could refer to. But at least there's a commonality of understanding, if people understand why something goes one way, why something goes something else, and it's kind of standardized, so that similar kinds of projects with similar goals or outcomes, they'll get treated the same. I just think it makes sense because it'd be a reference thing that everybody could refer to, at least understand.
If this project comes in at $1 million, just talking concept here, and it stretches your abilities to accomplish it, as a contingency, would it be possible to find out who could make a decision to give a variance to the boundary to convey the water outside this disturbance area to another area that needs improvement? Who would make that call? Is that possible to even make that call?
It wouldn't be the city. It would be Metro and the state who are kind of overseeing the grant funding.
All right. And Carlotta came down and visited with us trying to look for a solution. That was her reason. And she did offer to put her design team into this process to help save the city money, or any way she could to make something happen if it was possible to avoid these impacts. Is that something you would embrace, that concept of involving her with her willingness of Metro to help?
Well, let's just say this. It's not a problem with design. We've got a good design team, right? This is,
Right.
And we've got a tight schedule to meet.
Right.
So if the scenario that you're talking about is where the bids come in so high that we can't afford to do the project, is there an avenue to look at reducing the project scope?
That's one question, yes.
Then and if that would be benefited by having Metro staff help with the design work,
Well,
or
redesign it to flow.
redesigning it.
Let it flow across.
We're open to that. But right now, we've got a good design team. We've got a good design,
Right.
and we've got a good estimate. I can't tell you what that is right now, but they work on all those facets. They're going to design it. They're going to estimate this down to
Right.
a pretty tight
All right.
number.
Well, I agree that your design is good, and it's a beautiful design, but there's another way to solve this, and that's my point. So if Metro was to make a call, since they're involved in the flexible funding flow, about extending the boundary of the project to allow it to be dealt with without disturbing the material at River Shore, and solve the problem in another way, would you be open to that?
Let me ask you-
I don't think that's a fair question to ask me, Jerry.
Yeah.
There's project delays, there's lots of concerns there associated with that.
Let
And
me
then-
ask Jerry a question. Are you saying to move it on the north side then?
I'm saying
Water.
convey the waters we talked about across the road, Clackamas Drive, deal with it in the pre-existing swale that needs improvement below the toe of the slope
Oh,
in
pipe
John
it-
Storm Park.
pipe it down.
Not
Okay.
try to get it back in the urban renewal area because they don't want it.
Yeah,
Convey it across where it's going anyway,
yeah.
where it will go anyway, and deal with it without disturbing that mass of 42-year-old trees, et cetera. That would be a desire that I'd like to see at least looked at.
I'm not even sure, that area that you're talking about is within feet of the Willamette River. I'm not sure that we could build this kind of facility in that area, Jerry. I think there's a whole nother slew of
Well,
oversight
it's
that would
something
have to
that
go
could be
into
investigated. Now, last question I have, what are the pressures for time to get this built? Is this to be built in an operation by next spring or something, or what is it?
the need to get, it's actually the stormwater funding that drives our schedule the most. That's got to be completed by December of 2014. But if you look at all the ODOT reviews and ODOT approvals, we're hitting some pretty tight timelines that they don't
So
necessarily.
this is to be in
deviate
place
from.
by fall of 2014?
Is that approved or actually built?
Built, completed.
Okay, so this work will start next spring, undoubtedly.
Yeah, right,
Okay.
right.
Okay, one last question.
Trying to think,
I'll-
I had the schedule and I.
All right, one last question I have is that this committee needs to be aware, there's over 150 mature specimen plants beneath the trees that are very interesting specimens like you'd find in a arboretum setting or Crystal Springs, rhododendrons of great interest and such. Is there a willingness to work with others to salvage that? Otherwise, they get demolished.
Well, from
That's what I do all the time, of course, is save plants from everywhere. Not saying I want to save 150. I'm saying the material that we're talking about in this committee is strictly trees, and yet there's beautiful structure that can't be easily replaced. Andromedas and others, you know what's there, Brian, that
Yeah, the
have
andromedas
value.
and rhododendrons could be moved. The junipers I would give up on.
I wouldn't worry about the
I would-
junipers.
There's a
Big
fair
danger.
amount of, I'm guessing, intertwined roots between the trees and the.
Yeah.
Jerry,
That's
I
true.
think there is a possibility before the project starts to, before we bid that, before the contractor, to, right now those plants, as far as I'm concerned, belong to River Shore. They're in the public right of way. They were planted by the River
Right.
Shore.
It'd be nice to have them reuse them if they have a use for them.
Yeah,
Whatever.
they've been interested in clearing, I know in the past, and they've been interested in tree removal in the past. So
Well,
would I be interested in that?
Well, I don't know
think
who to
it's
talk
another-
to.
It's another liability out there, but
well, that's why I'm sure you're
I
sitting
guess
for $1
the
million.
other thing I want to
each
say
year.
is, this project's removing 38 trees.
Okay,
We're going to put back over 170 trees.
all right.
And I don't know how many shrubs, but we're going to have a lot more shrubs than what we're going to remove
All right.
for sure throughout the project. So,
John, what's the city's commitment just on kind of maintenance and survivability, after things are planted?
yeah, the contractor will be required to maintain and replace.
1 year, 1 season.
I believe it might be 2 years, 2 seasons. It was that way on Jug Handle Project. I believe it was that way on Phase 1, so I think that's true for this as well.
In long term, is there a maintenance plan?
The city will be maintaining that facility.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that the current irrigation is connected with River Shore at this moment in time, but that, of course, would
They'll
change.
be terminated and replaced with new irrigation system.
Okay. Can we have one public comment on this? Jim?
Jim Nacito, Morgan City. Didn't have a question on the design so much as I wanted to respond to Commissioner Spady's comments earlier. And this comes from my having spent 3 years on commission and getting a feel for the structure of Oregon City under our charter. And I think there's, in retrospect, from that experience, I've come to think that there are some really, really, really deep structural problems with our charter, and that the lack of responsiveness to the citizens is in part a structural one. And I think what really this is going to is part of that structural lack of responsiveness. And I think the way that your concerns are going to get addressed are really kind of the old saying that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. I think because I've been hearing, since I've been attending these meetings on the Heritage Grove ordinance, I've been hearing your concerns expressed every other meeting, and it's coming from one of the commissioners also. But most of the time, these commissioners are being vented as frustrations to staff, and staff doesn't change structure. The commission does, or the commission is the one that has the power to change structures. It is the legislative body of the city, and it can do things like refer charter amendments to the voters. What I think needs to happen in an instance like the Natural Resources Committee, which is still a relatively youthful committee after its reconstitution, is that there are still some wobbly things going on as far as the systems and structures of this committee that I think need to be addressed mostly by you, because you are the ones that are sitting in these chairs, experience the powerlessness and the lack of frustration, and the frustrations that I felt as a commissioner as far as being powerless. So I think that it's got to be a repetitive process where the members of this commission, maybe through a designee, go to citizen comment during city commission and express the problems that you're having directly to the commissioners, because they're the ones that have the power to make the change for you. I completely agree with what John was saying about it being a matter of time. The city government runs on a very spare, bare bones kind of existence. Almost everybody on a city staff is doing 125%, if not more. And in trying to, look at the bigger picture when you've got so many deadlines, so much pressure, it's kind of beyond what I think the average person can be expected to do. But I think where some progress could be made in these kind of systemic issues, commissioners are busy too, and they don't get paid, and have families to take care of and jobs to get food on their table. So they need some direct communication, voicing the frustration here. I don't think the average commissioner is going to be watching this on video right now. They're probably with their families. The time that they have to deal with a problem like you're confronting is during the commission meeting. So I think the most effective way that the commission can, and allies like me and others, to effectuate change is through direct communication with commissioners in a public setting like the commission citizens comment. I think it's fair game for people who are serving, again, like you are, for no pay, taking your time to get those concerns addressed is by going to citizen comment. So I would just advise having someone from here be designated by the group to be the squeaky wheel at city commission directly and tell them what's going on. So, my 2 cents.
I've got a proposal. If we're going to schedule a separate work session for the tree stuff, what if that work session not only covered the tree stuff, but we try to formalize or clarify kind of the concerns of the direction or what we want to do, with the interfacing with the city commission and that at the same time. I'm just saying, as long as we're shooting one evening and have a work session, why not address more than one topic?
Well, I think Eric isn't here tonight, but Eric is working on a communications protocol to address exactly that he wants to bring before you. He didn't share it with me yet. He just told me he's working on it and he wants to address it at a subsequent meeting to improve this sort of thing. And I think
Eric who?
Carr, he's a member of our NRC.
Oh, okay.
He's a, so, yeah.
Could he bring that up at a works? I'm just saying, because we cover so much stuff on these agendas on Night Bite tonight.
It's a big topic, you know.
I'm just thinking we could give more quality time or energy focus on it, maybe in a different setting than these once a month meetings. We have so many things on the agenda.
How does the committee feel about it?
It's going to be the same situation no matter where it's brought up. It's going to, you know, it's going to be pushing against our time limits. We're at 9:30 now.
Right,
And
right. A more specific approach we could take is to advise the Urban Renewal Board of what this situation that we're concerned about has had in terms of an impact on our thinking. And I still feel like someone could ask the question about the boundary, if someone's willing to do that, because I think Carlotta Collette will help. But if that's not the desire of this group, then the outcome is pre-assured. So I think this group has a couple things to do. One is advise the Urban Renewal Board that when you make these kind of recommendations that change the impact zone, there's impacts. They're serious. And the second thing is, if the impacts have to be dealt with in this process, was or is there another way to deal with them? Those are two questions we could ask.
I still think we're talking about two different sets of concerns. We have site-specific concerns.
I have a concern about what's happened here
Right,
today.
Right, no, what I'm saying is we
And
have...
Shaw's, and my belief, and I don't think I'm speaking out of line, is overall, this is what's been going on. This isn't John's problem. This is a problem fundamentally
John,
fatal to this group.
Great job of presenting what's.
You did a great job.
Well, and again, it's not about how this presentation went. To me, we've got project websites, we've got, you know, public notices. You know, is the problem that every project isn't coming before this committee? Because we're not programming in this committee when we have when we schedule consultant meetings, presentation meetings. Is there inefficiencies in that, or when we have a public open house, like for instance in our Transportation Advisory Committee, we have people that show up to those project open houses separately from the committee meetings, so that we don't necessarily have to have presentations to every board and committee that comes along.
John, I think
What they've done is they've actually assigned someone to make sure that they get to those meetings. We can inform them that there's a project and it's coming, and maybe, you know, if it's Jerry, he's your representative, or Richard or somebody gets to those, because it's not efficient for, these projects are already loaded with stuff.
I think you hit the nail on the head.
Amen.
When you said, do we need to inform you about all the projects as they're coming down the pike? And I think, yes, that's the answer. And then whether we choose to respond or not is totally up to us and our availability or our interest. But I think the issue is not necessarily knowing within the context of this committee. Because I mean, I don't know. I respond to things that are before me in the committee because I don't have time, like most people don't have time, to respond to public open houses and things. But to know the projects are coming down the pike, you don't have to come here and present to us other than to say this is what's happening. If you want to go to the urban renewal meeting because they're going to be discussing what happens with the stormwater issue, then you could choose. But not knowing is what is so frustrating, I think, for us. It's the not knowing.
Well, I think Pete did instigate sort of a list of projects, you know, a couple of meetings ago, that would be updated on it monthly or every other month or something.
Land use items, which are on private property,
Yeah.
which is different than capital
it's
and
different.
public projects. So maybe here's an idea, John. I don't know if this, when the bids go out, however often they go out for design or construction from Public Works, are those publicly viewable, available documents? They're on the websites, but
Well, that sounds like that's too late.
Yeah.
That's when
Yeah,
we want
that's-
to construct.
Oh,
But
for the
if it's,
design, it might
it's for
not.
design, do
Design.
those go out
But
separately?
the
Or?
construction, it's too late.
Design and concept planning would be the critical.
Yeah.
Yeah, often we, professional services like that aren't necessarily bid.
Right.
They're usually a negotiated contract, and so they often don't go out for
Right,
advertisement like
okay.
that. But we do contract awards. I mean, depending on the size of the project, this one's a sizable project. It's been, I think it's been public knowledge, whether it be because of the transportation issues or because of, the landscaping issues, or the Oregon City Shopping Center issues, or the Cove for that matter. I mean, they're all kind of intertied. So, yeah, I guess we can do a better job. We carry a list of projects and project managers that could
Yeah.
easily be shared and put on as an attachment to your agenda. So if there's something on there that you want to know more about, we can
Yeah, okay.
share that.
Yeah, that's the list. It would be helpful, I think.
Members could attend the open houses, but if our interactions or kind of deliberations or trying to generate recommendation, it's really hard to do that in an open house format, because some of us may make it, some of us may not. They may have input, and we can't provide any kind of quality input or feedback as a committee at an open house the way we can like tonight. I think it's the format of the event, and Pete, we couldn't even really come up with a recommendation at an open house, even if we're all there anyhow, right? Because we haven't given public notice for a meeting, or you know what I mean? Just our
I missed the
process.
January open house. I went to the April open house. I filled out cards, and gave them to the staff there, the architect staff, talked to Eric, your associate, and basically was given the card because of, Marshall's, the landscape architect's obvious concern about my things I was raising, to meet with him. That was probably the best thing I did. What I didn't get back was any feedback as to what the design looked like until a week ago. And I could say I missed a month in there. It's probably true. But there's a lot of things happening really quickly, too. So, there's some critical path. You were talking about critical paths, Bob. There's critical paths to follow here, and there's hopeless paths to follow. We're at the hopeless path stage, unless somebody wants to ask that question, which I come back to. Is this possible to do outside the boundary, still with Metro advocating for you and helping you with the costs? If somebody wants to ask that question and it's no, then this is the design. If it is possible that there's another way to do this and Metro will help, Carlotta's support was right there.
I've got an email drafted to Carlotta in response to kind of her initial question. I had a phone conversation with her today.
I know you did.
I can add that question.
Okay.
But I'll ask the question, Jerry.
Okay.
I think it would be good to know if indeed that option is too close to the Willamette River right away, and it's not an option to do a stormwater facility there. That's part of something they might be able to just
Yeah,
Check
that's
right.
a real important question in all this is,
Yeah.
could you put in a facility like that below where it floods much more often?
Right.
Yeah, if the water won't run down to it,
Well,
it's a problem.
there's
so-
periods of time when that's going to happen, but
Right.
it's not going to be every winter.
Elevation
Could be-
25 is at the base of that slope. This project here is at elevation 35 through elevation 48, I believe. So, and I will have to suggest that if anyone wants to look at a facility like this, it's at Meldrum Bar Park in the floodway.
Yeah, John, I think part of the problem is we're still trying to find out what we're all about, What
I
are we
get that.
supposed to be doing?
What's your purpose?
Yeah, what is our purpose? How can we best serve the city? But it's up to the city, I believe, to come up with that way, with our help maybe, on how we can best help, And Jerry and I were on the original Natural Resource Committee appointed by John Williams. What was that, 10, 12, 13?
And actually formulated by Shaw. She's the one that worked to establish it.
When was that? When was that?
1998
I can't even remember when it was. now.
through 2005.
And we stayed on it for a while, and eventually, we kind of all disappeared, and it was abolished. And then Doug became mayor, and he asked, some of us to re-up. And so on the original, it was kind of the same problem. I don't think it's as bad now, quite as it was then, but we're still trying to figure out what we're all about. How can we function? How do we interface, provide support, whatever. And
Well, I mean, we did the stormwater presentation for you folks.
Yeah.
There's a high demand for, there's a lot of requirements that come out of those permits.
Yes.
And along with that come needs, in order to meet those permits. That's an area where this group could be very helpful in kind of advocating for, are we about better stormwater quality? If we are, it's not cheap. It's not
Right.
cheap to maintain these facilities. It's not cheap to build these facilities. So, that and those requirements just go higher and higher every day. I just saw one yesterday come out that was troubling, but from a maintenance perspective and a cost perspective, and yet so whether it's stormwater, sewer, or water, I can tell you in just about every front that there's issues associated with that. These projects, I guess I would argue that the city, in terms of environmental stewardship, in the last 10 years, has made leaps and bounds compared to what was prior to that. And I don't know how much of that was driven through the Natural Resource Advisory Committee. I don't know that, but I know we've been, we go above board with trying to get, again, public involvement and putting together landscaping plans and projects that are impressive down the road. And so, I don't see mistakes necessarily. I see differences of opinion about how the project should be done. And I see the need for trying to get, if we've got a group that's focused on natural resources, trying to get that group in the loop more. And we can, Jim may be right about the structure, but I've heard this loud and clear. We can make sure we do a better job with that in the future. And, but sometimes there's a paving projects that for whatever reason affects a big tree, and all of a sudden we're cutting it down, and you're not going to be involved in that because we can't bring paving we can't bring every project to this committee. I don't think these significant ones that make sense, but there's other projects where we'll find ourselves in a situation where all of a sudden we got a tree issue, and you guys are going to be frustrated because you didn't know about it. And
Yeah, our bylaws say projects that have the potential to significantly affect natural resources are within the purview of the NRC to comment, and then it doesn't provide any more guidance than that. But what it does seem to indicate is that earlier involvement would help.
yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for spending the time.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Okay.
And Laura's going to bring you donuts tomorrow for logging you out of your presentation.
no donuts, please.
Okay, well, we'll change the order.
I got enough problem with that.
Okay,
I've got a question.
yep.
Is that Willamette Falls Legacy project update time sensitive? Do you
I'd like to
need-
put it on.
No, it's not time sensitive. We just gave you the most recent brochures that the consultant prepared. So there is a deadline if you want to complete the opt-in survey, end of the month. So be aware of that deadline, but we can push this out if you wish. The website has been up and running now, full bore, for about 2 weeks, and it's there. You can get all your information on there, including these brochures. So, the timeline is on the wall behind me. Basically, the visioning process is summer and early fall, which is what we're in right now, and we're shooting to have concept alternatives in fall and winter, and then actually hammer out a framework master plan in the spring of next year, which is pretty ambitious. Yeah.
Thank you, John.
Yep.
Thank you.
So,
So, this is,
huge.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that they've even I'm just scratching the surface of the public involvement at this point, but we want your input, and I think,
The open house that was held 2 weeks ago on a Saturday, there
yeah,
was an opportunity to do some design work, shall we say, impromptu, and put cards on a master map. And I did that along with some other people. I don't know anybody else from this group did, but this is another thing where if we're all interested, we should be involved in the process.
you're on the website, Jerry. Don't know if you knew that.
I'm on the website.
Your photograph,
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, I
Okay.
saw that. I forgot
All right.
about that.
filling out a,
And at some point, I'd like to talk to you about the east side lockage elevon, which I'm going to look seriously at. I'm looking at it with some people right now. Everybody's worried about Willamette Falls locks. One giant step for mankind and one simple step through a lock system that will allow passage on the east side. Much easier than trying to save those locks. And no one's thought about that, and I think it's time to get serious. The Corps of Engineers is not going to reopen Willamette Falls locks without a huge. I'm talking about one step like you see at certain dams like John Day, the Dells, where it takes all the problem into consideration, deals with it with one simple step. So anyway, I put some ideas on there, but I hope that all of us, well, we've had input forums to give input. We should be doing that.
Kelly Moosberger and Christina Robertson Gardner are co-managing the project, so anytime you have any questions, you can talk to those guys directly.
Okay.
And Walker Macy is the lead consultant for the website and the public involvement and all of that stuff. So they're going to be the prime consultant all the way through the process. So the open house that Jerry attended, that was very well attended. They got lots and lots of comments, hundreds of comments, and some big ideas. So I just encourage you guys to stay involved, and we'll try to get you more information on this as we move forward.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, our next meeting will be September 11th, and but without further ado,
And he's going to set up a workshop somewhere
Right.
at some point,
Work session.
yeah, and that's to be determined.
to be determined, okay?
Okay?
Yes. I'll
Okay.
send out an email about that by the end of next week. Yeah. Hopefully this week if I can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting, and
All right.
we're all
Good deal.
free to go.
Thank you.
Thank you.